And this was, writ small, what has happened with the Democratic Party writ large. This was the magic of Barack Obama, right? This is what Obama did as president. I know that we have this picture of Barack Obama as though Barack Obama was this wonderful unifying figure. That is a figure put forth by the media. It is a lie. Barack Obama of 2004 was not the same as Barack Obama circa 2010. In 2004, Barack Obama was saying there are no black Americans, there are no white Americans. We're all just Americans. There's no red America, no blue America, just America. By 2010, Barack Obama was breaking down Americans into their identity groups so that he could specifically appeal to members of those identity groups to create a coalition. This is the reason why he actually shrank his number of votes between 2008 and 2012, but it was enough to get him by Mitt Romney. So the merger between identity politics and typical sort of Democratic Party politics has been ongoing, and Joe Biden is the culmination of that, which is how you end up with a machine politician like Joe Biden, and that's what he is. A sort of machine, typical, corrupt old white politician who's suddenly become the face and voice of the racial reparations movement. According to one of Joe Biden's top advisors, he is going to start acting now to address reparations to black Americans. Speaking to Axios on HBO in an interview set to air on Monday, White House senior advisor Cedric Richmond discussed efforts targeted to helping minority communities. Richmond said they're not waiting on Congress. He said, we don't want to wait on a study. We're going to start acting now. We have to start breaking down systemic racism and barriers that have held people of color back, and especially African Americans. We have to do that stuff now, right? That's the vocabulary. And we're going to specifically appeal on the basis of race and suggest that all inequality is inequity. And Joe Biden has decided that equity is the byword of his administration. So, for example, he says that we are going to start talking about free college tuition to historically black colleges and universities. If you start talking about free community college and Title I and all of these things, I think you're well on your way. Now, let's be real about this. If you're talking about free college, the reality is that the great imbalance in our society is the number of people going to college between people who are black and white. The number of people who are white going to college by percentage is significantly higher than the number of people going to college who are black. That's not because of lack of affirmative action programs or benefits programs or scholarship programs. All of those exist in plenty. Right? The real problem is the failure of lower education, the failure of the public school system. So what is this? It's a typical Democratic policy smuggled in under the guise of the vocabulary. It's a typical Democratic policy position that is now being smuggled in under the guise of doing racial justice. You call it reparations, and then you can push forward the idea that you are speaking the vocabulary, and you can build your coalition on the back of all of this. And so this is the new pitch. This is the Biden administration pitch. Use the word equity to cram down all of the typical Democratic policy proposals and claim that anybody who disagrees with you is a racist. Because here's the thing. Joe Biden can't claim that anybody who disagrees with him is a racist. It's bizarre. That dude is whiter than the back of this piece of paper I'm holding up right now. I mean, if in a whiteness competition, I come in a distant second to Joe Biden. It is not close. Joe Biden is a super white dude. And yet, because he's using the language of quote-unquote equity and the language of anti-racism to push forward typical policy proposals, the idea becomes now that it is white supremacy to oppose Joe Biden's policy positions, an old white politician, one of the whitest people in America. And so that gives him enormous ability to push forward these positions while calling all of his opponents racist, which is, again, bizarre. Barack Obama could do it because he could just say people who hate me are racist. And while it was a lie, he could at least pretend it was true because obviously at least the factual basis of him being a black person was right. Joe Biden, not a black person, still making the same exact claims. So when you merge the Democratic coalitional ideal with the racial ideal, and all of it becomes about those systems of power, right? Not about facts, not about the success of the policies, about the systems of power, you can get away with nearly anything, and Joe Biden knows this. So what is he doing? He's pushing all of his typical policies, but all of it's going to be based on racial politics. According to the Daily Wire, Ryan Saavedra reporting, the Biden administration is reportedly considering scheduling a controversial vote on a gun control bill in the next couple of weeks. Well, I mean, of course he is, because he's always wanted a gun control bill. A report by Punchbowl News, which was founded by former Politico reporters, said House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other House Democrats were focused on turning their attention to other issues the Biden administration has on its agenda, including gun control, after passing this giant, quote-unquote, COVID relief package, which is really not a COVID relief package at all. Some of these controversial votes would require universal background checks on gun sales, which of course would create a giant gun registry. Another bill would close the so-called Charleston loophole, which allows gun purchases to proceed. If the background check isn't completed in 3 business days, you can hold these things up interminably, of course. And essentially, he is calling for a ban on semi-automatic firearms. I mean, that is what, when he says banning assault weapons, there's no definition to all of this. So this is, you know, typical Democratic policy being pushed under the guise of equity. Other typical Democratic policy being pushed under the guise of equity is immigration policy. So Joe Biden has basically decided to open the borders wide, and we all know this. And Joe Biden has decided he's not going to enforce immigration law. He's going to go right back to not enforcing immigration law. He's attempting to kill agreements whereby people have to wait in Mexico in order to see if they ought to be granted asylum in the United States. Instead, Biden just wants to release them into the interior of the United States. And meanwhile, he's trotting out his own members of the government to just lie about it. So he's got the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, saying there is no crisis at the border. This is just a lie. There are about 8,000 unaccompanied minors at the border. That is the highest number that we have had in many, many years. That is indeed, we're at 97% capacity at the borders, which is why we're now reopening all of the bad old Trump facilities, right? But it's not a crisis. It's not a crisis because Joe Biden says it's not a crisis. Here's Alejandro Mayorkas.
Do you believe that right now there's a crisis at the border?
I think that the answer is no. I think there is a challenge at the border that we are managing, and we have our resources dedicated to managing it.
One of your predecessors, Jay Johnson, he said that 1,000 illegal border crossings a day constitutes a crisis, that it overwhelms the system. We're at between 3,000 and 4,000 now, according to CBP officials. So how is this not a crisis?
I have explained that quite clearly. We are challenged at the border.
Oh, well, if you say it's a challenge, not a crisis, it's totally fine. And if you say it's a challenge and not a crisis, see, a crisis would require you to actually do something to stem the tide of illegal immigration. But here's the thing. For purposes of equity, the Biden administration has no interest in stemming the tide of illegal immigration. In fact, they are now openly saying, well, it's kind of awkward for us right now, so if you could just, hold off on the illegal immigration for 7 minutes, that'd be awesome. But, in the end, we're kind of okay with it. There's this is the Director of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, saying we're not saying don't come to illegal immigrants. We're just saying don't come right now, guys. We're a little overwhelmed.
I don't have a particular timeline, but all I can do is communicate both to the American public and to the individuals seeking protection that we are working around the clock 7 days a week to make that time frame as short as possible, but they need to wait. But they need to wait with a particular goal in mind. We are not saying don't come. We are saying don't come now because we will be able to deliver a safe and orderly process to them as quickly as possible.
I mean, I'm sorry. That's crazy. That's crazy. We know that the vast majority of people who are arriving on America's southern border are not legally claiming asylum. We know this. Okay, that is just a reality. The vast majority of people who arrive on the border are not claiming political asylum in its typical definition. And economic asylum is not a thing because economic asylum just means everybody gets in because America has a really strong economy. And when he says, we mean just don't come right now, what he's really saying is just come on. It's fine. Just come. Everybody knows this, including Democratic representatives. One Democratic representative named Vicente Gonzalez, Democrat of Texas, he says this immigration policy is absolutely catastrophic. Again, this is a Democrat from Texas saying that the current administration policy makes no sense.
My concern in the recent weeks in my district, migrants who made it across the border, who even passed the line of MPPs who are 5,000 folks that have been waiting for 2 years across the border, made it across the Rio Grande Valley, were processed and released. If that is the message that we send to Central America and around the world, I can assure you it won't be long before we have tens of thousands of people showing up to our border, and it'll be catastrophic for our party, for our country, for my region, for my district. In the middle of a pandemic in an area where we've lost over 3,000 people in my small congressional district.
Okay, I mean, that is just the reality. That is just the reality. But it all ties into the vocabulary again. It all ties into the idea that if you can tie everything into race, if you object to this, it must be because you object to America getting more brown or something, which is absurd. I've said 1,000 times, I do not care about the race of Americans. All I care about is the ideology, philosophy, and decency of Americans. That's all I care about. But not so on the left, because, again, it's not about the facts, it's about the narrative. And when it comes to the narrative, facts very often stand in the way of a good narrative. Alrighty, we'll be back here later today with an additional hour of content coming up soon. The Matt Walsh Show airing at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to check it out over at dailywire.com. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.
Today on the Matt Walsh Show, we're supposed to celebrate because for the first time, a child has 3 legal fathers listed on her birth certificate. But I don't feel much like celebrating. I'll explain why, if it's not already obvious. Also, 5 headlines, including Governor Cuomo facing political disaster due to his sexual harassment scandal. But how is it that this is the scandal that takes him down and not the nursing home scandal that resulted in the deaths of thousands of elderly people? And also the cancel mob is coming for Dr. Seuss. We'll talk about that in our daily cancellation. We'll discuss the left's latest linguistic innovation, which is women, but with an X instead of an E. All of that and much more today on The Matt Walsh Show. The New York Post announces the big news, a baby with 3 dads. This is supposed to be a historic first, a major milestone in human history. And it certainly would be if there actually existed a baby with 3 actual fathers. Turns out, and this is no surprise to the dwindling minority with a rudimentary grasp of basic human biology, that the child merely has a birth certificate with the names of 3 dudes written on it. Here's the Post with the details. It says, a gay polyamorous California throuple made history in 2017 when they became the first family in the state to list 3 parents on a birth certificate. Their reproductive journey and legal battle to become fathers to Piper, now 3, is detailed in 3 Dads and a Baby, written by one of her dads, Dr. Ian Jenkins. Jenkins and his partners, Jeremy Hodges and Dr. Alan Mayfield, don't see their family, which now also includes their son, Parker, as unusual. Well, of course, it is by definition unusual. It's not possible for a thing to make history and not be unusual. Indeed, unusual is the most polite and measured thing that I can say about this particular arrangement. But more from the Post. It says, Jenkins met Mayfield, a psychiatrist, while they were completing, so maybe I should tell you a little something about the psychiatry industry. Anyway, he met a psychiatrist while they were completing their medical residencies in Boston. The two were together for 8 years when Hodges, who works at a zoo hospital, came into the picture. Although their relationship with Hodges began as a friendship, things quickly turned romantic. After 5 years of thruppledom, the trio started seriously discussing parenthood when friends offered to donate their leftover embryos to them. Leftover embryos. Isn't it inspiring to hear human life referred to this way? Like it's a slab of meatloaf sitting in a Tupperware container in the fridge. I got some leftover embryos. Let me go grab them. I think I got a couple in the trunk. I'll go take a look. As it turns out, the leftover embryo, i.e. human life, wasn't viable. And the next attempt also didn't take. So they took several tries, just tossing out the embryos. No big deal, it's just human life. Finally, a helpful friend gave them some of her eggs, which were then fertilized in a laboratory and implanted in the uterus of another friend. Meanwhile, some fancy footwork was performed with the help of lawyers and tens of thousands of dollars of legal fees. And then presto changeo, just like magic, a child with 3 dads was born. Which is to say, a child with 1 father, a mother she'll never know, who was conceived in a petri dish, brought to term in a rented uterus, and placed in the care of 3 men who immediately set out to monetize her existence with a self-congratulatory memoir. Was born. Tomato, tomato, I suppose. If you're feeling not terribly excited about our new and improved society where babies can have 3 dads and no mom, that's because you're a normal and sane person. As a normal and sane person, the whole thing probably seems to you rather, unnatural, disordered. You likely have the impression that the interests of the children aren't being taken much into account here. Sure, the men feel great about their dad trio, but their emotional needs aren't the primary concern of normal and sane people. We're worried about the children, who are being treated more as fashion accessories than human beings. To respect their humanity is to acknowledge that children need mothers too. It is an absurd and damnable idea that the role of the mother can be adequately replaced just by adding more dads into the equation. I'm still not exactly sure what the exchange rate is. Like you so you have 1 dad, that equals a dad, and then you've got 2 dads, that equals a mom. So is it each dad equals 1 mom? I mean, how does it work exactly? Add 4 more dads and you have 2 moms, a dad. But if adding dads is the plan, why stop at 3? Why not 4 dads? 4 dads, 5 dads, 6 dads, 7. Beginning to sound like a creepy children's book that I'm sure somebody will eventually write. This is not a rhetorical question. It's something we really need to think about because the floodgates are officially open and have been for some time. Once society moves away from the nuclear family, not just in practice, but in a categorical denial that it is the ideal family structure at all, then there's no remaining boundary, no limiting principle. This is where the so-called slippery slope argument comes in, and it's why those who warn about slippery slopes are usually proven correct, even as the left laughs and guffaws at the whole notion that perhaps sometimes one thing might lead to another. I mean, they call something a slippery slope argument as if simply labeling it slippery slope is enough to debunk it. It's not. Yes, oftentimes slopes are slippery. Oftentimes one thing leads to another. The point with the slippery slope is that when you tear down a boundary without any idea as to where to rebuild it, or you get rid of a word's definition without even a suggestion as to what its new definition ought to be, then you have, obviously, that it would seem by design, sent this new boundaryless, undefinable thing tumbling into insanity and incoherence. You haven't actually moved the boundary or changed the definition of the thing, but simply destroyed it. As I've observed many times, this is the process playing out right now with respect to gender. We're told that the word woman no longer means adult human female, which is what it meant since the dawn of time. So what does it mean? If it's not that, then what is it? Those who seek to erase the word's traditional definition have, it turns out, no plans for giving it a new one. They don't seek to promote or a new or expanded concept of womanhood, but to annihilate the very concept itself. It is not really a slope, but a free-fall plunge into obliteration. Each new stage in our moral and logical descent is predictable and inevitable. If our biological identity has no meaning and can be changed on a whim, then the same will be done with age and race and every other aspect of our identity. It's not a question of if. It will happen. It is already beginning to happen. Because there's no reason why it wouldn't happen. Now that the precedent has been set and the logical and moral barriers preventing it from happening have been removed. And so with marriage and family, it's the same. We have seen 3 men call themselves dad. Soon, that's not going to be the strangest or most disturbing combination. Give it enough time, and even the self-professed conservatives will be defending the 3-dad concept as valid and equal, while maybe offering polite pushback to the newer, 4 dads and 3 sex robots family units. I wish I was exaggerating, but this is the path that we put ourselves on when we moved away from the mother-father nuclear family structure. We had it right the first time. That was right. Everything after that is wrong. And once you give up on that, there is no end. The truth is that every child needs and deserves both a mother and a father. We have to preserve that, or preserve nothing. There is no middle option. There is no compromise with moral insanity. You either fight it with all you have on every field of battle, never giving it a single inch, or you surrender and let it have its way with the culture. And we have obviously, in this culture, made our choice. And we chose very poorly. Let's get now to our 5 headlines. Now, a quick word from our good friends over at Charity Mobile. It's never been more important to support companies that support our values, to support companies that have morals, that share our values, because there's so many companies out there that obviously don't. And inevitably, you're going to be supporting a lot of companies that don't share your values. But when there's an opportunity, when you find one like Charity Mobile, you've got to jump on it. Charity Mobile is the pro-life phone company because 5% of your monthly plan price goes to the pro-life, pro-family charity of your choice. You can help build a culture of life in America while supporting a pro-life phone company. And that's, there's that piece of it. That's really important, obviously. But also, we should mention it's a great service with great perks that come, like new activations and eligible accounts get a free cell phone with free activation and free shipping. There's no contract, no termination fees, and no risk with a 30-day guarantee. So that means that there's no reason to not try out Charity Mobile. Live customer service, based right here in the USA. You also have the ability to block cellular data, picture messages. So you've got that parental control as well, that safety that comes with it. So if you want to be a part of Charity Mobile, call them at 1-877-474-3662 or chat with them online at CharityMobile.com. I have to tell you, and this relates to what we're going to talk about in the daily cancellation and a little bit to what we just talked about in the opening monologue, but I am, maybe it's on my mind, I'm kind of crisis of conscience a little bit, and it's Lent, it's a time for atonement and confession, so I have to confess to a little bit of hypocrisy myself. I was playing Scrabble with my wife a few days ago, And in the early going of the game, she was beating me, and she never beats me in Scrabble. I take immense pride in my Scrabble prowess, and in fact, in my prowess in all board games. It's all I have. It's the only thing I'm good at is board games, and so I cling to those. And finally, we get towards the end of the game, and the score's pretty close.